Welcome back to Anvil Airsoft TV. I'm your host, Tom Anvil Hibberd, and today we're talking all about this situation that's pretty much just arisen in Canada with the C-21 bill, which could potentially ban airsoft over there. I've got a couple of guests over the internet to talk about this situation, and also the parallels that it had to the situation we had in the UK in 2006-2007 with the VCRA. So on the line, that's like some old BBC sports thing, isn't it? On the line, I've got Ben English Kiwi. Hi Ben, how you doing? And and Phil Bucknell, who has a wealth of experience on this topic, actually, and we should be interesting. We'll talk about the parallels between what's happening in Canada at the moment and what happened in the UK well over a decade ago now, which a lot of people, Phil, have forgotten.
I think there's a lot of people who weren't even playing them now.
Yeah. Okay, so Ben, so recently in Canada, and you're the one that really brought this to my attention, and I've been doing a bit of research. Recently in Canada, there's a bill called C-21, which has been introduced by the Liberal government, Liberal being the political party, not that they're Liberals, well, they are Liberals, but there you go, which effectively, digging into it, is to reduce gun crime, but whether inadvertently or not, airsoft has been swept up in this.
The way they worded it is quite confusing when you read it, but basically what they're saying is any object that looks like a real firearm and that real firearm is capable of producing over 52.4 meters per second at the muzzle, or 5.7 joules. Basically, if it looks like that gun, you can't have it. So airsoft replicas, like these, that look like firearms that, can hit people and kill people, they're suddenly going to be banned in Canada. Unless you already have them, you can keep the ones you already have, but you can't sell them to anyone. So they're just going to kill off the idea of airsoft, unfortunately.
So they become a become
a restricted item.
Prohibited device or restricted item. Previously, airsoft guns were kind of in a loop, slightly grey area, and Phil, this will be familiar, in a slightly grey area in Canada, where if they fell below 500 FPS, they weren't firearms. Canadian Airsoft was operating a bit of a loophole. Kind of familiar to the situation in the UK, where our stuff was operating in a bit of a grey area till it got defined. Actually, till it got more defined in the VCP fairly recently. And to put it into kind of layman's terms, if you have a replica of a gun which is a real gun, that replica is as banned as the real gun is. It's a bit crazy. Now, some firearms obviously are still legal in Canada, but it's mainly oldie worldy hunting rifles and stuff like that. Stuff which isn't black and scary and tactical. So basically, what effectively the Canadians are doing is they're banning anything black and scary and tactical, and they're allowing the provinces and the individual kind of communities and cities to ban handguns if they want as well. And airsoft has been, but it looks like airsoft, rather than with a VCRA, Phil, which was deliberately targeted at replicas, but wasn't directly affecting airsoft. This one looks like they've directly targeted airsoft and paintball and Nerf guns and all that sort of stuff within this set of legislation.
Yeah,
it's quite knowing.
Like the Nerf guns will be fine, but and even some paintball markers. And the worst thing is that speedsoft guns will probably come out of this okay because they look anything like a real firearm. So it would be interesting. Genuinely, it would be interesting to see how and if that is affected in the same way. Because let's face it, they don't look like realistic.
Well, there's no mention of colour in it.
Yeah,
so we don't have.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
No, I noticed that it was literally all about if it looks like X and fires at Y, it's out.
And it doesn't have anything like the UK law where it's if it can be easily distinguished as not being a real firearm. Then it's fine.
There's no differentiation between RIFs and IFs like we would have in the UK.
No.
Which we've talked about.
The real guns there as well anyway, I suppose it's less of an issue.
Well, firearm ownership is more common in Canada. They're still restricted to an extent, but it is much more common. As you would imagine, it's still a wilderness in many areas. It's totally understandable. But there are still sports shooting, 3-gun, all that kind of stuff that exists within Canada as well. And obviously they're affected.
Yeah, I mean, mag capacity I noticed in the full bill was that you can't change it from, I think it's 10 rounds. So
I think it's 5.
Is it 5? It was 10 a while
Yeah.
ago. So yeah, it just looks like they're really cracking down on any sort of form of shooting that doesn't have a walnut stock and bluing.
Yeah, pretty much.
basically.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, in many communities in Canada, there is a need to own a firearm.
Oh,
I mean, there are bears and stuff, you know, and people hunt for a
Yeah.
living and hunt for food. It's a thing. It's what they do.
But
But
I guess the government's point of view on that will be, well, if you're going to go hunting or you need it for defence, you don't need to have a semi-automatic assault rifle. You just need a bolt-action cartridge.
But they're not banning
semi.
semi-automatics. You can have an SKS.
No, they're not.
yeah.
All right, okay. So, but they're banning
You
tactical
can't have an
accessories.
AR type, yeah.
You can't have a scary black gun.
It's like the old,
Yeah.
it's like the old American assault rifle legislation. You know, if
Yeah.
it's got a flash hider or a bayonet lug or a pistol grip, all the stuff that they said makes a gun instantly 10 times more lethal than say a 1022, which is exactly the same as a Smith & Wesson 1522. It's just got different colour furniture made out of a different material.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see how many of those politicians would be all right with a bolt-action rifle when a brown bear's charging them down at 30 miles an hour to snack on their innards.
Yeah.
I bet they wish they had a semi-auto then.
I mean, it follows on from a kind of, I'm not sure it's called an executive order, but effectively there was an executive order in May which banned 1,500 firearms specifically by name, and this is a follow-on from that. So that's kind of the firearm thing, and it's been touted as avoiding gang violence and inner city violence and drug shootings and stuff like that. That's the it's probably I don't want to go too far into politics, but it's probably a very populist thing to be doing, like most firearms control laws are. But I think the difference between the UK, Phil, was that it seemed to me back in 2006, 2007, and you'll probably know more about this than me, even though I was around at the time, is that they weren't targeting sports like airsoft within that legislation, whereas in the Canadian situation it is.
Yeah. I mean, Airsoft wasn't even on the radar. They didn't even know. I imagine they got quite a shock when, Association of British Airsoft came knocking on their door saying, excuse me, you're going to destroy our hobby and there's thousands of us. Well, maybe not, because it was Hazel Blears back then, so she really didn't care either way. Probably still doesn't. So it wasn't so much that we were specifically targeted, but we just got wrapped up in a catch-all sort of white paper thing that was trying to do exactly the same thing, limit violent crime, limit antisocial behaviour, and it was just broad strokes measures as well. It wasn't. It just grabbed everything, and I mean it's worked wonders. Knife crime's fallen dramatic. Oh, no, it hasn't. But anyway, it was all good intentions. But yeah, it wasn't a specific target. And I think that was partly one of the things that made it so difficult to fight for defence, because they didn't have a bloody clue what it was or why we needed to keep the guns that we use for skirmishing. And just before anybody jumps in, the imitation firearms were the government's idea, not Airsoft's. Nobody came up with that saying, this will be a good idea. It was the government who said you can still own one as long as it's blue, green, orange, red, for more than 50% of its overall colour. But yeah, Airsoft wasn't a primary target. I mean, the main thing was antisocial behaviour like gangs hanging out and knives. We were really unfortunate we got caught up, but we were very, very lucky that I think if it had happened 10 years earlier, we'd have been knackered.
Okay, so let's go into things we think the Canadians could do. So I know they've got a big petition going on. I know that luckily for them, I guess, because guns are, actual real firearms are being swept up in this, are the primary target of this. All the gun advocacy groups are also going to be defending airsoft. So there's a bit more advocacy behind it. But what if Phil can just go through? I mean, Ben, you might find this interesting as well. If Phil can go through how we fought, what happened, just very briefly, and because I think the Canadians, they don't have a trade body, and they don't have a players' union, and they don't have any of that at the moment. So, what happened in the UK when this kicked off?
Well, we had none of that either. And the first thing that I remember seeing about it was Tim Wyborn, and I can't remember exactly who else there was. And I know Ken Elston, who started Fireball Squadron, who's an old friend of mine, was very involved in it, started ABA, the Association of British Airsoft, specifically to lobby the government of the time to prevent airsoft being banned. At the same time, there was quite a lot of forum activity, if people can remember that, before Facebook, saying, write to your MPs, but they were putting up kind of very standardised but polite letters people could download and just put the right name and sign it and send off, because some people really didn't help by sending emails, very vitriolic messages to Hazel Blears and to her department and various other people as well, sort of threatening all sorts of violence. Like, that's not going to really win us any favours. There was also a big movement to lobby MPs, and I had several meetings along with many other people I know with my local MP.
I met mine at the time.
Yeah, and some were more receptive than others. Some gave you the party line, others would perhaps take a bit of an interest, and some were actually really proactive. And I was looking at mine, certainly on the face of it, appeared to be quite proactive.
Mine was pretty good. My guy was Labour, and he said he would go and speak to Hazel on our behalf. He wouldn't disobey the whip, but he would absolutely go and have that conversation. Okay, so Phil, so that was kind of the start. It was kind of and I think the Canadians haven't got to the point of having a sensible written central letter yet, and there isn't a central.
And I think they need to get they need a centralised person or people, because around the same time, Matt Fury King, and I've been thinking about this as well for a number of years, because I've been playing for about 10 years by then, probably 12 years, maybe a bit more. He approached me at the same time I spoke to Ken about starting a players' association, and I'd actually bought, because it had just come up, the UCAPA, so the UK Players Airsoft Association org URL, for if you could. I still owned it up until about a year ago, or 2 years. But people had tried in the past and it failed, literally fallen down at every attempt. And there was about 15 of us. I remember we met at a working man's club in Birmingham, and that was when UCAPU was born. And there was a lot, considering that people talk about the community. There is no community in Airsoft. There's groups of players who get on, and then there's groups of players who can't stand each other, and they very rarely will pull together in the same direction. And even less if there's nothing immediately obviously in it for them. So trying to get players to unite behind an organisation was really difficult, and Tim had the same problem with ABBA, with the Association of British Airsoft. But people put their hands in their pockets. They spent thousands of pounds in some instances travelling to government meetings at the Home Office, meetings with police, the chief constables and all that. And that is what it took. It took a hell of a lot of effort of writing letters. And honestly, if we hadn't managed to get, I can't remember her name now, but a lovely Baroness on board who kind of supported us.
It's one of the Lords.
Through the Lords. We had no chance in the House of Commons, none whatsoever. There was no way we were going to get anything written in the law that would be cast iron, 100% protected. So we were lucky. We got defence in the face of the Act, I think the terminology is.
Okay. So let's summarise. So there was a formation of a players' union. The Association of British Airsoft was representing who, Phil?
That was representing Airsoft, but it was mainly retailers who had a financial stake in it.
Okay.
And they got stakeholder status as well.
Right. Because one of the things that happened in UK law is that unless you have a financial interest, it's very difficult to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I want to stress if anyone's Canadian watching this, your sites and retailers need to get together quick and form something because they have a financial interest.
Yeah.
And governments
don't think, somebody else will do it.
Governments ultimately fine. They're supposed to care about their people, their population. They really do care about money, and money's quite important to them.
I wonder how many businesses there are in Canada that will be closed because of this bill if it goes through. Because it's not just sites and retailers. There are a couple of manufacturers in Canada. I mean, the Daytona kits are
Okay.
no one wants to lose Daytona.
God,
Yeah.
no.
So
No, I mean,
that's the argument
I
they've got to make.
know they don't make guns, but if there's no gun, I imagine the home market's still quite a big market for them. I don't know whether that would be effective, whether the grenades that they make would be swept up in it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Canadian viewers, Players Union, Retailer Stroke Sites Association.
Retailers, yeah.
Because they have a financial interest in the continuation. And I think the next thing I'm just going to bring Phil onto is going to the upper house. Over here we have the Lords. Over there they have a Senate, which is the upper house. And generally upper houses are there to put controls and checks on the lower house. In our case, the House of Commons. I don't know what the Canadian equivalent is, but that's what they're for. So I think trying to get a hold of the Senate, and generally senators are appointed. And I mean, not we have hereditary peers over here and life peers, but generally. Upper houses are less affected by party politics and voting with the whip because they can't be disenfranchised. They can't be deselected. So as we'll go on to now, Phil, because you touched on it earlier, finding someone in an upper house that's willing to fight your battle is really key. So do you want to touch on how that worked out?
Yeah, I mean, I can't take any credit whatsoever for that part of it. That was somebody else who sort of managed to do that and reach out. But yeah, do some research, find out about your senators, as it is in Canada, find out what their interests are. There's bound to be some in a country like Canada who are pro-shooting, who have kids who are, they may even play airsoft, or grandkids, sorry, it's more likely to be, isn't it, at that point. But it's going to be a case of just you've got to do some good old-fashioned detective work and go and research who is actually sitting in your Senate, find out which ones are going to be the most likely to listen to an approach from a coherent and concise representation. Not 30,000 airsofters chuck in really badly written emails or letters their way, but a small sort of, delegation, I guess, maybe of 3 or 4 people, somebody representing the players, somebody representing the site, somebody representing industry. That's all you really need. Maybe somebody who's got a good handle on Canadian law as well. If there's bound to be a shooter or two in Canada who's a legal eagle. That should be enough, and then start trying to get meetings with the senators that you think could be useful, and also MPs, both on the ruling party side and also the opposition. So that's the best way to do it, really. But yeah, as you said, Tom, the Senate is going to be less under pressure to follow any party hard lines or voting. They're not going to have people telling them which way to vote as much. So the Senate is probably the best way of doing it. Certainly over here it was, because the House of Commons was just,
There was no chance.
We would have lost Airsoft. If we just focused solely on the House of Commons, we would have been, Airsoft would be dead.
Yeah, and then there's also I think, again, the arguments that we used in Britain for the defence, why we needed to have realistic imitation firearms in order to do Airsoft, those arguments are probably extremely valid in Canada as well. Yep.
I believe somebody I know has a really nice line in T-shirts.
Well, they're acting out of military and law enforcement scenarios for the purpose of recreation. Yeah, I think it's because, and I actually had a discussion the other day with a guy on probably UCAC, UK Airsoft community, about what's the problem? Why can't we just use unrealistic firearms? We're like, see ya.
You know, you've got people going, it doesn't matter what they use, just let them play. Like, well, it really does, because our whole defence is based on this suspension of disbelief and the acting out of military and law enforcement scenarios. Don't recall anybody stopping a siege with a bright pink ARP9 ever in the history of law enforcement, or anti-terrorist activities in Afghanistan, all running around in spandex.
Well, we all know the blokes on the balconies were all equipped with ARP9s, right? That's
with
what they
with
have.
drum
8,000 of them.
HPA and drum mags.
Yeah.
I think I've also not done a massive amount of digging into this because we've done this quite quickly. But there's also going to be groups in Canada which aren't airsofters which use airsoft guns, and we had the same in the UK. Reenactors, film, television, theatre, museums, living history, all of that. Sports shooter, all those guys are also affected. So it's well worth trying.
This bill is really targeting it because they're putting in the bill. There's basically it's a criminal offence to promote gun violence in media.
There's
a war film when someone gets shot. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of Canadian armaments company that supply the film industry as well. So those guys are going to be in real trouble. Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't see an exemption for those guys. No. So, and actually, film and television make a lot of money, millions of pounds. It'd be well worth airsofters getting in bed with those guys as well.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of film production and TV production that happens in Canada. I mean, all of the Stargate franchise was shot in Canada.
In the same quarry.
In the same quarry. Yeah, Canada only has one quarry.
Every planet.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, that's one thing that never happened in the UK. So we have people who are collectors going, well, I'm covered. I go, no, if you actually read the legislation, you're not. It doesn't cover collecting. It doesn't cover free gun. It doesn't, although they could probably get away with it because their guns are multicoloured to an extent.
That wouldn't wash in. That wouldn't wash under this legislation, though, because the shape and form is
It's that of, like, say, an STI edge, some sort of.
Doesn't matter if it's pink or not. It still has the form of
But it was really that they just sat back and thought that they'd be covered, and really, even if you're a collector. It's like, no, you won't be able to. You're not going to be able to prove that you fall into the criteria that's covered by our defence. And that's another thing, you may have to settle. So if this is for the guys in Canada, I know what you probably want, which is a cast iron protection in law that you're never going to get banned. You may have to settle for what we've got, or the Canadian equivalent, which is this defence on the face of the act, which means it's still illegal.
Yeah.
But if we can prove that we play skirmish games and the reenacting of law enforcement or military scenarios, they probably won't prosecute us. They still could.
Yeah, so what Phil was saying is is also really important. I think I know I've got Canadian viewers, and I hope this gets shared in the Canadian airsoft community. You may not defeat this outright. It just may not happen. No. And as Phil says, you may need to go for a defence or an exemption. And if you've got other people within that exemption, that makes that much easier. If there's an exemption for film, TV, theatre, reenactment, museums, also crown servants.
Yeah, I was going to say crown servants. Just certain crown servants.
Certain are allowed to do it as well. If you bundle that all together and have a more coherent offer, that may help your cause. It may help the campaign. I don't know. I'm not a Canadian constitutional expert.
Do you think it's worth the Canadians going down the route of going, look what they've done in the UK and how they're controlling it and how they've limited? Because honestly, how often do we have incidents in the UK where riffs are used in a illegal manner?
A lot.
I mean, it's really hard to get the numbers.
Yeah,
apparently it's less. It's less than it was. There was about 3,500 a year before the VCRA, so you can kind of see why they were getting a bit fed up with it.
Yes. I mean, I guess the other thing we should probably talk about quickly is just, honestly, it seems like a faff having to go through the thing of proving that you're a skirmisher to pick up a riff, but it's actually pretty good because it also stops people going out and buying an airsoft gun and then playing a game going, oh, I don't like this, and wasting money because you've got to go do a couple of games and rent kit and then you learn at that point, and then you've built up an idea of what riff you want before you can buy one. So when you go to buy it, you probably get the riff you want and not regret it.
So for our Canadian viewers, a riff in the UK is a specific legal term, and it's a realistic imitation firearm. And if you want any more,
Help you.
he's off.
If
Imitation firearm,
riff.
realistic imitation firearm, and the difference is one of them is painted in a predominantly a bright colour. Potentially, if the Canadian government really isn't listening, that is another defence. That is another way you can get around it. You may have to use brightly coloured guns. That would really suck, but at least they're kind of the right shape. Portugal in the EU has a law where a certain proportion of the gun has to be a really bright colour, and they get on with it.
But the way they get around it is they all paint them yellow and make them look like they're on blank fire training exercise. So they just do like the stock and the muzzle in yellow.
Yeah.
Which I know kind of sucks, but then you can go down the whole route of I'm training in the army.
Well, you can start. You can start here. We want everything, and then just work your way back down a list of stuff.
I think you've got to really. You've got to start up here, and you've got to expect that you're going to finish up somewhere near just below the waterline. Hopefully with a snorkel. But I think it's really important to stress it ain't going to be easy. It ain't going to happen at all if nobody gets organised. That's the key thing. If nobody is prepared to stand up and go, right, I am willing to pull this together, whether it's one person or 20 people, and it's going to cost money. It really is going to cost money. And if you're lucky, you may end up like the UK, which is where we've got this self-regulation thing, which so far, I mean, for 15 years nearly, we've been bloody lucky that they've not cracked down more. Or you could end up going that way that they had to go in the Netherlands, which was licensing.
Licenses, yeah.
Everything has to go through the NAVB. Everything. Every purchase, site memberships, everything. It's all, and you have to be a member. So you've got like the two extremes, but still keeping it as Airsoft. Or they could just ban it. And if nobody stands up for it, that's exactly what will happen, because that's the path of least resistance.
But this is partly why I wanted to do this episode, was because it seems like they're getting organised, but just up to my extent and from my experience with the VCRA, they're not quite there yet. And I think hopefully if this episode can get out to some of my Canadian viewers and it can get shared, there's some ideas in here. There's like a 2-hour live stream on UK Airsoft law on this channel, which may help again. And there's links to all specific legislation and what happened in that as well. But I really wanted to get a couple of people together just to talk about this after Ben brought it to my attention. So I don't want to drag it on too long. I know everyone's busy, but get organised. Really, I think that's the message. Trade body, retail body, players body, and go to the upper house. I think that's the way forward with a coherent, organised, sensible discussion.
I think the other thing that we should express is there is hope. Because we in the
did
UK
it.
face a similar thing, and not me, you guys managed to fight it and win effectively, allow us to continue with the sport. So it's not impossible for Canada to do the same.
Yep.
And as you said, get organised, and you can fight it as a one big front.
Yeah, I think joining up with some of the firearms groups, the ones that are sort of centred rather than the more extreme lefty and righty ones, but the ones that actually have a coherent voice as well, and aren't just going to use Airsoft to throw under the bus to save themselves, because that can happen too.
It's been tried several times over here.
Yourself with. I mean, there was a particular chairperson of a particular shooting association who was quite happy to throw Airsoft under the bus until he got absolutely torn apart in the House and various other forums. So you've got to be careful who you align yourself with. But if you don't align yourself with anybody, you're going to be playing with pea shooters.
Yeah, yellow plastic boxes with a trigger on it.
Yeah,
foam dart.
I think do not feel like it's a defeat if you get to keep playing, but you end up with a defence like we've got. I mean, our defence is literally a signature. It's only ever a signature. That's all it would take from the Home Secretary.
It is.
Doesn't have to go back to the House. Doesn't have to go for any votes or any sort of debate, if they decide it's too much trouble, one pen, Airsoft's dead.
Because Airsoft's not named in our primary. It's a bit of an aside, but Airsoft isn't named in our primary legislation. No. It's in a note to an amendment to the primary legislation, and Airsoft effectively operates under a defence. And we've already spoken about it, acting out military and law enforcement scenarios for the purpose of recreation. That is our defence. And because we do that, we're allowed to own realistic imitation firearms.
And that
so
it's worked really well so far, I think. Airsoft has grown. So it's not all doom and gloom. Even with the limitations, it doesn't mean that Airsoft's going to die on the vine. It can grow, it can flourish.
Oh, it's massively bigger now than it was 15 years ago.
Oh, enormously.
So, yeah, no problems. Okay, guys.
Get organised.
Yeah, get organised. Align yourself with the right people. Coherent voices. Talk to the upper house. Talk about money and jobs as well. That's important. Not, I want to have fun. Money and jobs and employment and opportunity and all that sort of stuff. I really hope this has helped. If you need to reach out, you can reach out to me and I'll try and put you into contact with people in the UK that have dealt with this. There are a lot of them.
I'm happy to pass on any advice as well through Tom.
Okay, guys, let's wrap up because I know we're all busy people. Phil, where can we find you on the interwebs?
At Clearwater Airsoft on Facebook or at Clearwater_Airsoft on Instagram. I don't do the YouTubes unless it's for you, mate.
Thanks, mate. It's always appreciated. Mr. Ben, English Kiwi Skinner, where can we find you on the interwebs?
I am the English Kiwi on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well done. And you know where to find me because you're watching this already. So thanks for watching this. If any of our, again, I want to stress if any of our Canadian viewers want to reach out, and we'll put you in touch with the relevant people who really can help your campaign if you want to. Thanks for watching. Most importantly, stay safe, keep fighting, and we'll see you soon.